Okay, guys, here we are for the Mid-Week Fife Property Show. Would you believe that a Fife starter home is 36% cheaper than it was in 1989? QVT! Okay, here we are, guys. Would you now? When I saw this in the beginning, when we were going through this, I thought, "Aye, right, okay, impress me." It's like no way is a Fife starter home cheaper by 36% than it was in 1989. But let's go through these numbers and actually prove that point. Perry, would you like to kick us off and talk about this?
Yeah, I would, and like you, Jim, I was quite surprised when we kind of were doing the research on it that was the situation. I thought it just can't be, because I remember back to those days and how challenging it was, unfortunately, showing my age now. But even though the average value of a first-time buyer property has risen by 312.6%.
That's mental. Sorry, just 300, almost 313%. That's gone up triple since 1989.
Yep.
It's actually more than that now, because when we did this article, it was the month before. The average house price is now 165,000. So it's actually more than that. That's crazy. That is effectively, what, 30 years? About 33 years, and it's gone up by 313%. Sorry, property investment isn't a good idea?
It's like 100% every day.
Of course it is.
But the good thing about that is, though, that the monthly payments that first-time buyers have to make on the mortgages are proportionate to their take-home salary nowadays as well. You know, take-home pay is 35.8% less today compared to 1989.
Ah, so that's where it comes from. So just let me clarify that. The monthly payment for first-time buyers must make on their mortgages as a proportion to their take-home money.
Yep.
Is about 36% less than it was compared to. Okay, right. It's all hitting home now, right? Okay. So what we're saying is if your take-home pay was £2,000, for example, and your mortgage in 1989 was £1,000, for example, that's 50%. But what we're saying is 36% less now compared to 1989 of your disposable income. So instead of the 1,000 out of the 2,000, it will probably be something round about £750 instead.
It's about £750.
Okay. Yeah. So that actually makes it quite you know, in my head I've got that right now. The reason why that is. So, you know, according to the Nationwide Building Society, Andrea, what was that thing about the Nationwide Building Society?
Right, well, they were saying that the average first-time buyer only now needs to pay about 19.4% of their household take-home pay on a mortgage payment, compared to the 30.3% in 1989. So it's just over a third less.
Jeez, that's mental. Look at that. That's less than a fifth of your salary now. Your take-home. Well, no, actually, your salary, your take-home pay. So less than a fifth of your take-home pay actually goes on the mortgage now. And mortgages aren't allowed to be interest only. There's very few are allowed that now. So that's basically a capital repayment for everybody. I mean, even in 1989, when you look at that, you know, you did have a lot. That's an interesting statistic, because when you think about that 30% actually is including interest only mortgages as well. You don't get interest only mortgages now anyway, I know that, but that 30% included that. So even that wasn't even paying down capital at that time, and that was a huge figure at that time as well. So it just goes to show you. I mean, you might say that in 1989, 33 years ago, was a long time ago, but not relevant actually today, and you know, not relevant to today. I would agree. So next, let's look a little closer to home, and in 2007. So what was it like in 2007, Perry?
So the average first-time buyer spent 34.7% of their household income on their mortgage payments.
So about
So
a
that's
third of their
actually,
income, yeah.
yeah.
So make it easy. If we were on
So,
£1,500 of our income every single month, £500 of that would go in a mortgage.
Yeah, absolutely. Which is a massive difference to say you had £1,500 now, and actually only 300 of that would be going on your mortgage.
Yeah, okay. So
Big difference.
That's a huge difference, because that's a saving every single month of about £200.
Yeah.
In proportion to that, that is a huge difference. So that's about 44% proportionally cheaper than today.
Yeah.
I would say. So so why do we say all these things then, Perry?
I think again it's just a bit of calmness, isn't it? We see the news and everyone's getting a bit concerned about the property market, but I think it's good to get these facts and do a comparable to actually what is the real cost of living in regards to that part of what your outgoings are versus historicals, because it is reflective, isn't it?
Do you think then this is why inflationary pressures in the economy, because we have a lot more surplus income to spend on things that, I know I'm going to be controversial here, because some people jump in and go, no, we've not got any money, but I'm talking about more disposable income to spend on things that we want to spend on. And that's why inflationary pressures coming through, because we've got more disposable income. Therefore, where more people are actually chasing what we call luxury items. Therefore, these luxury items go up in value as a result of that. I know there's other things as well, and the factor, the energy prices and that. But we had this inflationary pressure before this happened, though, didn't we?
We did. I think what's happening now, though, is that because the proportion of what people are spending on their mortgage payments is less in a percentage of their income, yes, they're spending it, but could it be that they're doing luxury goods, or is it actually the inflation is getting impacted? Because you're right, there's quite a bit of people's income that is going on utilities. I was watching that on Sky this morning, and that is impacting people. And they were looking at kind of all these 8 runners that there was this morning, all talking about cutting taxes when everybody was voting to kind of put them in place last week, and how that was kind of impacting the budget. So I think it's a difficult one. I think people are looking at luxury items, but I think more so that surplus that people are having because they've not got so much outgoing on their mortgage payment is actually balancing out a little bit for them so that they can still enjoy their life whilst paying all of their additional bills that have increased.
So that's why the Bank of England then last month, the Financial Policy Committee, said they would be removing their mortgage market affordability test on people taking out mortgages actually in August. And there onwards. The test was introduced in 2014 to ensure that the UK didn't have a repeat of the 2008 credit crunch, and particularly hit first-time buyers with what they could afford to buy. I mean,
I don't know, can we look at that statement though, Jim? Because that kind of concerns me a little bit. We've done quite a few shows in the past where we've talked about actually why that's a good thing to have that in place, and how that credit analysis is there on people so that we don't get overcommitted. I know we've done come in some of the article piece, but what is your view on that? Because I mean, that kind of sends a little bit of alarm bell off for me, just because we lived through it maybe.
It's absolutely crazy. It is mental. My view on this is they shouldn't take away the affordability test, the stress test. And that's effectively what they're doing. And the reason that they're doing that is because the base rates are getting risen so much that they're going to have to stress test at 3% above that, because that's what they were doing. So now instead of stress testing at 5.5% interest rate, they're going to probably have to stress test at about 6 or 7% interest rate, and they know fine they won't be able to give anybody a mortgage. And guess what? The banks are in the business of lending money. They're not in the business of doing anybody any favours about they only want to make profit for themselves, and they want to make it they want to make it easy for them to lend money. Therefore, this is why this affordability test by the so-called Financial Policy Committee, which is basically a license to do whatever you want, policy committee, and then just throw caution to the wind and let's get lending again as much as we can. So this is why this has been taken away in a slight, and one of the measures. The other measure there as well is the 4.5 times your income level. Now you can get 4.5 times your income, but this used to be 3.5 times your income, or it even used to be 3. I remember.
I remember
I remember a time actually when I go back, was it 2.5 at one point in time?
Oh, I don't know about 2.5.
I wasn't born then.
I definitely remember 3.
That's when a bag of chips was 3 pence. I do remember that.
I do remember.
And there was an outrage when it went up to 5 pence. But that was the potato crisis, where there was a shortage of supply in potatoes, and everybody was raiding people's farms for their potatoes. But that was a long time ago in the 70s. When inflation, I believe it or not, inflation in the 70s was 25%. Base rates in the 70s was 19%. Just let that sink in for a minute. There you go. It's only base rates just now is just over 1%, and it was 90% in the 70s, and inflation was 25%. So this is the thing they do all the time. But I definitely think the affordability test, what they're doing here, and they've taken that off, is not the way to go forward. But the banks want to lend money, the government wants to keep the economy going. They know houses, and the houses, having a good housing policy, and actually a supply of housing and a turnover of housing can actually keep the economy going. Because the classic example is you get contractors working on new kitchens, you get new plumbing systems put in place, you get everybody in a job, because you've got solicitors in a job, you've got mortgage brokers in a job, you've got the estate agents and the letting agents in a job, because the housing market is kept rotating all the time. It's a circle of life. They're just trying to keep people in jobs, and this is
just trying to keep that supply chain working, aren't they?
Yeah, this is one measure to do it. This is how they're doing it. So that's why this has been taken away. I mean, this rule means that Fife property buyers could soon be able to borrow thousands of pounds more and purchase larger homes. See what I've just connected there? See the strong correlation between this being lifted and the very fact that the housing market being pushed up. This can only begin to then push house prices up again. So therefore, they're talking about trying to stabilise the market, but they're not stabilising the market at all by doing this. All they're doing is allowing more lending to take place. And in actual fact, they've talked about things like, as well, and we talked about this, was the stuff about 100-year mortgages. That's a mental policy. By the way, who wants to pass on their debt to their children? There you go. There's a mortgage for you. Nice to welcome to the world. We'll just saddle with your debt immediately. And then I tell you what, you can go to university and you can get student debt as well. On top of that, so you can get my debt as well. You can get your student debt on top of it as well. And it's a recipe. It's a recipe for disaster, I would say. There's only one way this is going to go, and I could see that coming. I mean, let's look at this, and let's see if I can get this graph. Okay, I'll get a wee graph. I'll love a graph. I'll get this up there now and I'll show you to give you an example of what it was like over the years. Share screen, we'll just jump on there. We'll bring this up. I'll have to open it first to get that. That's on my desktop. Speak amongst yourselves.
Yeah. Well, Andrea, how do you feel about this? Because, I mean, you've got a young family and a granddaughter and, looking at buying homes and things like that. Do you think that gives more opportunity or adds maybe potential future pressures?
Yeah, I do find it's quite interesting currently for me, because 3 years ago my two sons bought a property together. And since then, there's been a girlfriend in there, and now a baby in the mix as well. So one of the sons, his partner and baby, are looking to buy their own place. But that means that the houses will need to be sold, and they'll have to buy other properties, because the other son that's remaining won't be able to afford, unless he can remortgage on that one in his own name at a cheaper rate. That might be an idea, but obviously they will need to get professional advice over it all. But I still do think that the way ahead for people is to purchase. I think renting, I've always felt that you are just paying somebody else's mortgage. It does give you more flexibility being in a rented accommodation, because you can move when you want to. Okay,
whereas, let me just counter that argument.
Okay. Oh, I feel like
so here's the why you would rent, and why you would rent is because you don't have any repair bills. If you've got a house that's a bit more, and then if you're only living in a certain accommodation for a short term, maybe 2 or 3 years, the cost of entry and the cost of exit to buying and selling is prohibitive. So that's why you would rent in the short term, and I mean the short term, and maybe even between 5 years. Also, it might just be predominantly for a job. For example, yourselves that the RAF have placements, they're put to different places, and they're maybe just put to a posting for maybe 3 years. So you often get people that will rent to someone else as a result. So then they go and rent somewhere else as well, because it's only a 3-year secondment, and then they're back to where they were before. So that's where renting actually has a big bonus. And you don't have the encumbrant debt that goes with it. Remember, at the end of the day, all you're doing is you're renting from the bank, well, mortgage. You've maybe got ownership of the capital element of the property, and you have got the option it will go up in value. But all that allows you to do then is buy another property at a proportionately similar increase, and then just continue to rent from the bank for the next property. So there's not, and the only way you'll ever realize that amount of money is if you actually downsize significantly and release all that money later on, or you actually sell up completely and then go to rent, and then you've released all that money as well. So there is a smoke and mirrors going on between the banks and the fact that they're trying to convince you that home ownership and the government as well is the way forward all the time, every single time. And there's that sort of, you've got some tangible asset, but the reality is, renting's fine because it suits a purpose, and it is effectively you're just paying your mortgage anyway, which is rent. So there becomes a proportionate time as well where maybe interest rates goes up to a point where actually renting becomes completely viable for everyone. And the other thing as well, when you think about Andrea, and I often ask people this question, would you continue to live in the same house that you are right now if you had rented it? And for some people, the answer to that is no, I would have moved by now. So it's all these different things that go in. So there is a place for renting and there is a place for buying, and it depends on what somebody's personal circumstances are and what they see as their way forward for the future in terms of what they're doing. If you've no intention of staying here, then possibly you would probably want to go somewhere else and rent there, and then look to buy at that place. And rent in short term. So I rented in the beginning as well. I rented for probably, I think Elaine and I rented for maybe a year and a half before we actually bought our first house. And then we just bought after that. So we've no rented after that. But I do realise there's a purpose for it. I often got the other one as well, as I got someone that actually said to me, we sold their house years ago in Dunakia in Kirkcaldy. Now I had a one round the corner, and she says, Jim, could I rent that off you short term? And she meant really short term. She meant maybe about 3 or 4 months till I get my next place and find my next place. But she stayed for 3 years. And everybody said to her that she worked beside, and she was in the Fife Council. They said to her, why on earth are you renting? That's just dead money. And she said, she actually rebut to them was, do you know what? She says, I just need to lift the phone and Jim comes round and fixes it like that. I have no hassle. I didn't get involved in organising contractors and everything. I've got no hassle at all. I know exactly where I am. I can walk away from it anytime I want. I can buy another property anytime I want. So it suits my purpose. So she actually stayed with 3 years rather than 6 months because it was perfect for her. Anyway,
that sounds very familiar.
I mean, you did the same as well, Perry, didn't you?
I did exactly the same, and I rented from Fife Properties as well. And I only intended to be there between 4 to 6 months, ended up staying just over a year because the right thing didn't come along, and it was perfect for us. And actually through our life, Billy and I have rented about 3 times. We've maybe been in, when we were in Aberdeen, for instance, we were there for 10 years, and then we had a secondment down to Kent, and I thought, we're not going to buy a house because we don't know if we're going to stay there. And so it does work. So, but I can see where you're coming from as well, Andrea, because then there was a part of me while that was working for me, kind of thought, this could be invested for me if I was paying a mortgage, and whereas actually it wasn't really investing for me in the rental house.
Well, I can't disagree, Andrea. Definitely. I don't like the phrase "it's dead money" because it implies that you should never rent at all ever, because you're just throwing money into the fire. But it's not. There is a purpose and a reason for that. Anyway, let's look at a good graph. I love graphs. So let's look at the graph. This is the first-time buyer mortgage percentage payments as a percentage of take-home pay. So you can see that there. Look, in the 1983, it was sitting at around about just under, probably about 23%, and then it moved up to about 35%. Do you notice this is at times you'll probably find, and I should have got another one with inflation on this, but I bet you a pound to a penny, this is probably following a strong indicator of where inflation was as well. So if inflation was high, you'll probably find this percentage take home was high because they put interest rates up at the same time in order to combat that. Hence the reason why your mortgages are up in price as well. So I think at the time when inflation's maybe rife, look there as well, interest rates started to rise. See that up to the 2007 before the credit crunch. This is because prices were moving up astronomically in terms of price points, so people were actually getting it, and then eventually the credit crunch happened, and then it dropped like a stone, because interest rates dropped like a stone as well, and it made it more affordable to buy a house. And plus the fact everybody's mortgages became cheaper as well, didn't it?
Well, it did do, but if you look at that, going back to that 34.7, Jim, so yeah. I would be interested. A combination of that is potentially interest rate rising, but actually people were able to borrow 125% of the house value. So no wonder the payments were higher.
That was a good thing as well. Yeah, absolutely. There was schemes in place from the Northern Rock who are no longer here for that reason. Yeah. Who did irresponsible lending, and they just lent it to everybody as had a pulse, basically. You want 25% more than your house value? Oh, absolutely. What can I do on it? Oh, well, you can spend it on anything you want. You can spend it on a holiday. You can spend it on a new car. You don't need to spend it on your house at all. And that's why the Northern Rock is no longer around.
Yeah.
Learn our lessons. But I don't think personally we're learning our lessons. I mean, the decision to withdraw the affordability test certainly raised the eyebrows in the press, primarily as the Bank of England had raised interest rates 5 times in the last 6 months to try and reduce rising inflation. You notice how that's like they've raised it 5 times in the last 6 months. But if you say that in the context, and you look at what it's raised from in 2, it's like 0.1 to 1.2.
I know, it's so dramatic.
Aye, I mean, it sounds like that, doesn't it? But that's a typical news media thing, isn't it? It's gone up 5 times in the last 6 months. It's like, aye, okay then, but it's only gone up like really like just over 1%. Let's be honest. Is that really a problem for most people? Possibly not, because they've all been stress tested previously. As I stated in the first part of this, and when we're talking about it, first-time buyers are comfortably paying their mortgages compared to previous years. Therefore, everything should be okay with this rule change, in inverted commas, possibly. The old rules tested home buyers on a mortgage repayments. If interest rates rose to 6 and 7%, yet the bank thought that this rule was too harsh. That's why they've got rid of it. But again, we're coming back to saying that it's because we want to lend more money.
Exactly.
We're in the business of making money. So, where should your money be in the next? And if it was stock market, I'm not a pundit, but I've got a funny feeling that bank share prices and profits might actually go up over the next couple of years before anything materially happens. I mean, Perry, what else is, has any other rules changed?
Okay, no, I mean, not all rules have changed. I mean, the important Bank of England loan to income ratio is staying put. So although we're kind of not doing the stress test thing, they're kind of doing an income ratio test, which I guess is a little bit of a safeguard and safety net. So that kind of takes over some of the concerns that I have. But I guess it's only because I've experienced what happened in that crash that makes me kind of think, oh, I don't know if that's a good idea. But no, so there is an element of safeguarding still there with the fact that they're going to do that loan to income and keep that there.
Yeah, but it will allow more people to actually borrow, won't it?
It will.
And our advice is probably, I'm no financial advisor, and I've got to say that, but my advice is if you're going to take out a mortgage right now, you're probably better to try and fix it at a lower rate for a period of maybe 2 to 5 years, so at least you've got some certainty. Because if you're locked in on that for 5 years, and you know that's your payments, and you know what your salary is, and you possibly know what your salary is probably going to go up maybe a couple of percentage every year. I'll just qualify that for everybody else. Don't you guys expect that?
Hang on, this is recorded.
I had to say that. It's like, because you would go, oh, we're going up in our salary next year then.
Jim, this is timeless.
You said in that show.
We'll just walk out now, then.
Get the placards out. We'll strike that. Sorry. It just flew into my mind. I thought, wait a minute, am I planting a seed here?
It was the way I saw your chair going flying back, Jim.
I mean, when you think about it, it's if you lock in for the next 5 years and you do have these smaller salary increases, notice I said smaller there, smaller salary increases over the years, at least you're proportionally better off then, because your income's going to be proportionally less. Your mortgage is going to be proportionally less every single time when your salary goes up. And I think that's going to give you some sort of certainty. So I think that's why it's actually pretty good to do that. We all know the debacle of what happened about the irresponsible lending with the Northern Rock as well. But I believe it will have a progressive effect on the Fife property market. Progressive to the point of view that actually prices will still continue to maintain and stabilise. And I genuinely think still that prices will still continue to go up over the next couple of years. I still predict that they will do that. From a Fife tenant's point of view, what are we thinking, Perry?
Okay, I mean, for me, I think it will. Many Fife tenants who've been paying rents for all this amount of time, they actually might be able to get an affordability on a mortgage payment now.
Yeah, so that's probably the plus point out of that.
Yeah. So for them, I mean, they have the opportunity to purchase their first Fife home potentially.
And I've got to say that's possibly a good thing for the rent rises, because the shortage of supply in the rental market is causing rents to go up quite a lot. Now, over a period of time, rents haven't gone up that significant over the last 20 years in Fife, but in the short term, they've gone up quite dramatically, and they will still continue because of the shortage of supply in the rental market. So absolutely, we could do probably a wee bit of breather and a wee bit of relaxing with the fact that more people will come out of rented accommodation and actually go into home ownership. However, if that means that landlords will continue to sell up and that will change over, that will still cause a problem with rents going up because supply will be even less. It would only work if landlords continued to rent these properties and you would still have the same amount of supply. So it means basically for people that want to move out of tenancy into home ownership, that the home ownership market will get fueled again. And I think that's where the government's thought process is. I mean, let's be honest, we're saying the Bank of England and all the rest of it, it's really the government behind the scenes pulling the strings.
I'm very cynical, as you know, but I often wonder if sort of bringing out, changing rules and that is often a way for the government to get more voters.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. People who own their own houses tend to vote more. So
I can't disagree with that either, Andrea. Yeah. It's I have the same thought process sometimes. It's like, why would they be doing that? And then you have to think to yourself, when something material happens on the news and you think, why is that on the news? But more importantly, you should be thinking, what's getting pushed through Parliament in the legislation at this point in time that they don't want you to see?
What's happening in the background?
Yeah, exactly. What is happening in the background that all of a sudden this is now on the news to take the view off of what's happening in the background. That was a classic one they used to do before. You used to cause a calamity somewhere else in order to push a bit of legislation through in the old days. So that wouldn't be put on the front page of the newspapers because something else took precedent. And then by the time it was all finished, it was done and dusted. We've got it. It's through. Can't say anything now.
Make a noise here to camouflage what's happening here.
Yeah, smoke and mirrors every single time.
Smoke and mirrors.
One of the questions. Sorry. I was going to say regarding tenants and rents and maybe levels of rents maybe having to go up or go down. Again, I've always had lived by the adage that if things are too expensive, people won't go for it. It's the same like you take a theatre. You know, and it's maybe got 500 seats in it per theatre. It's got 500 seats in it, and they can only fill it half full in the shows because our tickets are so expensive.
Yeah.
I maintain you bring the tickets down to an affordable price, people will pay for it. You'll get bums on seats. And I do think it's the same for empty houses and rent things. You know, obviously it's still got to cover your costs and
it's
things.
Economics, isn't it? It's economics. It's supply and demand. It's and there is a finite point where it's better to actually raise the price because proportionately you'll get more income in as a result by raising the price than the number of people you'll lose, and vice versa. You know, possibly if we reduce the price, we'll get more people in the theatre in your example, but then therefore they might actually spend more over the counter. So we might actually get more revenue that way. So it's a fine line here to do that, and it's exactly the same with the housing market. And I think that's why they've only done this one thing to see how that goes first. And if that doesn't happen, then they'll introduce something else. You know, so it's just the last thing the government can afford to do is have any problems with the housing market because we know what happened in 2007.
Yeah. I mean, I do know that it was just last week actually, someone had posted on social media that they were paying, I think it was £1,200 in rent, and they're still getting turned down for mortgages.
Yeah.
And they said, you say I can't afford my repayments on a mortgage, on a £750 a month mortgage, but I'm paying £1,200 in rent.
Yeah. Can
So
I give you a wee inside knowledge on that? There's more.
Was it
to
you?
It. There's more. No. There's more to it than you think. Because I know we've been a property investor that in the past mortgage companies have come to us to ask if they paid their rent on time, and is it all the time? And that is one of the criteria they actually use. So if you're paying your rent all the time, you're paying it. You should get that no bother with certain companies. You should get a mortgage no bother, and that could be used as evidence to say that you can't afford it. In circumstances where somebody usually comes up with a story like that, the media jumps on it with one bit of soundbite and says, "Oh, they're not getting it for that reason," and then they fail to tell you that there's something else in the background causing that problem. But they only want to tell you the stuff that supports their message.
Yeah.
That's all. So we're back to the cynical thing.
Yep.
on that note, though, I mean,
You just call it the Fife Cynical Show.
No. We're all about positivity here. But it's true, though. I mean, and I think a lot of many Fife tenants that have been paying high rent payments, whose mortgage payments were below now, but maybe failed that assessment affordability test previously, actually might be a good opportunity then now to get reassessed, because they might just find that they're able to get on that ladder now and start that process. And although, as you say, Jim, it could cause a drought, if you like, in rental. Well, it will, but only if they're wanting to buy the rental. If they're going to go on and buy another property that other people are moving up the ladder on and so forth, it doesn't maybe necessarily impact that, as long as you say landlords continue to keep renting and keep their portfolios, then we shouldn't have that as an issue.
I mean, the real change, you're absolutely right. I'll open up Fife property market again a little more than before, and it'll allow house prices to grow in Fife again. Geez, as if anybody out there's really wanting them to grow again. However, it's going to happen. It's inevitable. I would advise anybody who's been refused a mortgage on affordability in the past to speak to a mortgage advisor about it again. And if you don't know one, please feel free to drop us a message, because we will put you in touch with people that are actually really good in their different field, depending on your circumstances. So we can point in the right direction of maybe 2 or 3 different mortgage brokers based on what you're telling us about the right person to actually get you the right product, to get you the right house. That's really what it comes down to. Let's just wrap it up here, guys. What's your thoughts, final thoughts on this then? What have you thought? What's this giving you some cohesion on? What clarity on? And so what clarity have you got out of this, and what would you advise people out there have tuned in?
I'm thinking, well, it's given me a bit more clarity that I can help my children prepare for possible change. It's coming in August, so that's only a few weeks away. I think the mortgage companies are going to get extremely busy, because there'll be a lot of people inquiring. Just
so inquire
if you
now,
can go for it, go for it.
Inquire now. Don't wait till everybody else. Just get on with it now. As I say, hey, do it now. And when you're ever asked when's the right time to do anything, now. That's answer to everything. Just take a leaf out of the book of Jim Carrey. Yes, man.
Oh God, no, that didn't always work out, though, did it?
Imagine if I'm sorely tempted to try that out one day and just do yes for everything.
I thought I did that
anyway. Perry, what's your final thoughts on this?
Yeah, I think for me, whilst that headline about removing some of the kind of stress testing was a bit of a concern for me, when you see it again, it's all the headlines, isn't it? But when you see it in black and white like that, and you actually understand the affordability for people at 20% of their income now versus nearly 38% of their income before, does show that there is good affordability there. And I think it's opening up a new opportunity for potential people who didn't have that chance before to own their own home. So for me, that's always a good thing. I mean, as Andrea said at the beginning of the show, everybody wants to feel that they've got something that they've worked really hard for and towards, and having your own home is one of those things, isn't it? So if people can do that, then I think that's a real plus. And if they're in doubt, again, there's great people out there that can give you really good advice to help you along the road with that. And if you want to reach out to us, then we're happy to point you in that direction. But I think in the basis of what we've seen today, it's a positive thing.
Perfect. Okay, and on that note, that's us finished. Thanks very much for coming on the show, Perry and Andrea.
Thank you.
And it's goodbye from her. And it's goodbye from her.
Goodbye from them.
Yeah,